Welcome. We at St. Luke's have been granted a wonderful honor. That is the honor of caring for people as they journey through illness. We walk with patients and do our best to care for them in the time they are here. Some get better and live happy and long, full lives. Sadly, some do not, and their lives end while in our care. This is always hard, but it has been especially hard during this time of pandemic. We've seen far too many lives cut short by this coronavirus. Though we have fought for them, though we have tried to use our knowledge and skills and talents to keep them alive, it hasn't always been possible. We feel each of these losses deeply. We know that each life is unique and precious. While we don't always have the time or the opportunity to mourn them properly at the time of death, we can pause now to remember them, to say goodbye and pay our respects.
It's now been 2 years since we've entered this uncertainty and this unknown reality we call COVID-19. All of us have experienced this disease in one way or another, whether we ourselves inflicted with this disease or our family members. We've experienced the loneliness and the helplessness of being apart from our loved ones who are isolated and nearing death. Our patients and our families have sought ways to be near when their families wanted them to be near and when they had a need to be near during those times of end of life and they could not physically be present. And our staff has also searched for ways to be helpful and loving and compassionate as we care for those who are dying. We experience helplessness sometimes and hopelessness at other times. We're not being able to make things better. In these 2 years, many have experienced the sting of death because of COVID. But even though COVID-19 has consumed us these 2 years, there are others who have died deaths that are not considered to be COVID-related. There are many grieving, and their families and their friends who have died for other diseases or accidents or health issues. And so we continue to look forward to a time when our daily lives will have some kind of normal to them, where we're not consumed with this disease, and we will go back to the way things were. We know that better days are ahead, even if we don't know when those days will be. Today, we remember those who have died, those who have died from COVID and other diseases. We hope that in the few minutes of remembering, there can be peace and healing. And our goal is to help you remember and maybe smile as you remember stories and relationships and encounters with people. I recall my first experience of death and the death of my grandmother. She was 86 years old when she died. Grandma Jorgensen was and is an inspiration to me in many ways in my life. I remember going to Grandma's apartment, and immediately when the door opened was this aroma of brewing coffee, of sweet baked coffee bread, and of smiles and stories and embraces. And when I think of Grandma, I experience that aroma again. Those baked goods and that coffee and Grandma being with me again as I remember stories and my experiences of her. Those were important times in my life. I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school. Grandma had been in the hospital for several days. My father received a phone call at 5 o'clock in the morning. I knew that people didn't call at 5 o'clock in the morning, so I knew the message was not a good one. Grandma had died. And now I left my parents and grandparents, other grandparents and aunts and uncles to plan a service. I remember the death that grief brought to me as we sat at the funeral home and in the visitation. I sat there with my cousins, each of us wishing this weren't true. That it was all a dream, that Grandma would somehow wake up and say it's all a mistake. But of course, it wasn't a mistake, and Grandma wasn't going to wake up. I wanted to cry, but real men don't cry. Until one afternoon, when I was doing my farm chores, it all came loose. The tears all came, and I remembered Grandma and her stories and the aromas and all that she was and is to me. I felt that deep sense of loss and hurt, but somehow the tears brought release. And suddenly the pain in my gut was gone as the tears rolled down my cheeks and onto the ground. I later learned that real men do cry. That it's not a sign of weakness, but a sign that we have a time to care for ourselves. And I've since learned that it's a normal part of grieving the death of the special people in our lives. I share these thoughts today because I want us to move on, to not be stuck with the thought that we must remain here alone, that we must be strong for those around us. Allowing the tears to flow is an honest way to be present with what's inside of us and to be present with those who are around us still. It also gives us permission to do what is natural as we grieve. It helps us to remember that the pain we're experiencing today does not last forever. It will one day become less of a burden. We will find a new normal even as we do so with that empty place at the table. As we remember our families and friends who have lost their lives, I invite you to allow yourself to tell the stories, to remember the aromas and the relationships and the stories. Remember the death of those that have lived and we still love, because love does not go away with death. Love continues on as you tell the stories and as you experience life together with them. It might be argued that love only ends when you stop telling the stories and when you stop remembering. And so today we remember those who have died. But I invite you to recall the relationships of love. Tell stories about the lives shared with those that have died. There is sadness as we remember, but we have so much more to experience than sadness. It may be a time of healing for us as we remember and as we tell the stories. And as you tell the stories, it is okay to laugh, even if laughter comes through the tears. And sharing those important stories, those important relationships, help us move toward healing of our broken hearts. It is in remembering and in the sharing that hope is restored. Whether the death was from COVID or because of some other issue, the struggles are real. The losses are significant. Don't be afraid to tell the story. Don't be afraid to remember the aromas and those experiences you have of others, as I remembered my grandmother in her apartment. Allow yourselves to experience wonderful memories. And yes, let those memories provide healing.
Next, we'll do the candle lighting. So in the next few minutes, we will light candles in honor of those who died over the course of this past year. For those viewing this from home, we invite you to light a candle as well, if you're able, to honor loved ones that you've lost. All it takes is a moment to remember them and what they meant to us, a moment to give thanks for the time we had with them and for the legacy they leave behind. First, we light the candle of memory. We honor the memory of those who are no longer with us. We remember all that they were and all that they meant to us. They will be missed. Next, we light the candle of courage. The courage to confront our sorrow, to comfort one another, and to adapt to new realities. The final candle represents hope. Hope that our loved ones are at peace. Hope that even as we grieve, we know there are times of healing and joy ahead of us. Author Jan Richardson offers this blessing called Blessing for a Broken Vessel.
Do not despair. You hold the memory of what it was to be whole. It lives deep in your bones. It abides in your heart that has been torn and mended 100 times. It persists in your lungs that know the mystery of what it means to be full, to be empty, to be full again. I am not asking you to give up your grip on the shards you clasp so close to you, but to wonder what it would be like for those jagged edges to meet each other in some new pattern that you have never imagined, that you have never dared to dream.
May the light of these candles remind us of those who have died. For a time it was our duty to care for them, but now we turn their care over to a great power greater than us. May they rest in peace. For all those who are watching the service, especially the healthcare workers, we wish you courage. The courage to keep caring, to keep trying despite the pain and the setbacks and disappointments. Because there are others who need us, there is more work to be done. And for everyone out there, we wish you healing. Hold on to hope, be kind to one another, and go in peace.